I'm going to celebrate 30 years of being ordained as a pastor, which is hard to imagine. Thank you. I know I don't look that old. Where does the time go? One of the weirdest parts of being a pastor, aside from having an elder in one of my congregations walk into the delivery room at the hospital when I was in active labor to see if I wanted to be prayed for, one of the weirdest parts is how many people I have witnessed actively dying and how normal death is to me. If you think about it, most of us only know about death through close family members and friends. At one point in my ministry, many years ago, I spent 3 years as a hospice chaplain, and that meant every day at work, I walked alongside people who were dying and their family members. Suffice it to say, I have been present at more deaths than the average person, and I have seen every process imaginable. While I can now honestly say I am not afraid to die, I can also honestly say it's not something I want to do anytime soon. If there's anything we have learned from the global pandemic we have lived through so far, it's that all of us are vulnerable, and there are no guarantees, despite how careful we might be, or how healthy we try to be, or how young we are, or to our minds, invincible. As I think about my own dying process, whether now or decades from now or somewhere in between, I know that I want there to be an element of joy in it, for me and for all who accompany me through it. What about you? While this may seem like a big ask, it's not an impossible ask. The question becomes, how can I or how can you plan for joy? When we first began our series on joy the Sunday after Easter, we talked about the harmful theology of joy that's been passed down through so many conservative Christian churches. This harmful theology of joy says you need to ignore or deny or repress every bad feeling and simply put on a face of joy so you can look more Christian. And then we talked about how we can experience joy in the midst of difficulty, like in the midst of a pandemic, or even when someone close to us dies. Joy and sorrow can be, and often are, very close companions. In that first sermon on joy, I described an interview between Krista Tippett and Ross Gay in the podcast On Being. Krista asked Ross if we are being called to joy in moments like these of the pandemic, moments of difficulty. Ross responded by saying, "Joy has nothing to do with how easy or difficult things are, but that joy comes from understanding that in every moment of our lives, we are in the process of dying. And it's precisely that reality that connects us with tenderness to our fellow beings." Tippett asks him to say more, and Gay responds by saying, "Joy is the moments, for me, the moments when my alienation from people, but not just people, really from the whole thing, it goes away and it shrinks. If it was a visual thing, everything becomes luminous. And among the things of that thing connecting us is that we have this common experience. Many common experiences, but a really foundational one, is that we are not here forever. And that's a joining, a joining. Planning for dying with joy, then, is about living with joy, and that means this deep awareness that we are not here forever, and we share with tenderness the dying process with all living beings. Have you ever seen a dead tree and felt immense sadness? While I mentioned I've been present with more dying people than I can count, I have one story that stands out in what I would call the joy factor. My story is about a mentor couple I had while in college and beyond. Their names are Ken and Jean Hansen, and they attended the church I attended while in college in Santa Barbara, California. While I was in my early 20s, they were in their early 70s. I've never met anyone quite like Ken. Ken attended Wheaton College at the same time as Billy Graham, and they were classmates. When Ken graduated from Wheaton with a business degree, he and Jean wanted to go to China as missionaries. After their first child was born with Down syndrome, they realized they would need to stay in the US, and Ken and two other classmates from Wheaton started the Service Master Corporation. You might recognize that name, all the yellow vans and trucks that drive around this whole country and beyond. They were deeply committed Christians, all three, and the company was, as Ken told me, in the service of the Master. That's how they came up with the name. Ken used the money he made from what became a Fortune 500 company to support missionaries all around the world, since he was unable to be a missionary with Jean. Ken was one of the most disciplined people I've ever known. He was up at 4:30 a.m. every day to do his daily devotions, to check in with the various mission organizations all around the world, and then to get on with his day. Whenever we had evening meetings at his house, he would promptly get up at 8:30 p.m., no matter where we were in the agenda, wish everyone good night, and give instructions on how to turn off the lights and lock the doors as people left. I still smile when I think of him walking down the hallway to go to bed at 8:30 p.m. with a full circle of people still meeting in his house. But what I really want to share with you about Ken is that while he enjoyed his life and was deeply in love with Jean and loved his children, Ken had a lifelong desire to be reunited with Jesus for eternity. He believed in heaven. He was assured of his salvation. He could think of no sweeter thing than to be with Jesus forever. Ken could honestly say, as the Apostle Paul said in our reading this morning, that it did not matter to him if he lived or died, because each had its tremendous benefits. If Ken lived, he could continue his worldwide missionary ministry. If Ken died, he would be at home with Jesus, which is how he described dying. I visited Ken in Santa Barbara when he was dying of cancer. His wife Jean had died a few years before. And though Ken was very close to death, he had a big smile on his face that was genuine. Ken told me he was finally going home to be with Jesus and that he had been waiting for so long for this reunion. It was hard not to feel the joy emanating from him, even in the midst of my sorrow at having to say goodbye to him. He would surely miss his children and grandchildren, and by then even great-grandchildren, but there was no containing his joy. The Apostle Paul describes this In the letter that was read this morning, while he was in prison, Paul says, "For to me, living is Christ and dying is gain. If I'm to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me, and I don't know which I prefer. I'm hard-pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and be with Christ, for that is far better, but to remain in the flesh is more necessary for you. Since I'm convinced of this, I know that I will remain and continue with all of you for your progress and joy in faith, so that I may share abundantly in your boasting in Christ Jesus when I come to you again." Well, while I'm not afraid of dying, I'm also not in a place where I could say, as Paul said, or as Ken believed and said, that living is Christ and dying is gain. I try to live intentionally while I'm here on earth so that when I die, I won't feel regret or feel as if my life is unfinished. But I have not, nor do I, experience the kind of desire or longing for reunion with Christ that Paul describes and Ken lived. The way I imagine it, they each had one foot in both worlds, equally, whereas I'm pretty sure I have 2 feet solidly in this world. So am I missing something if I don't look forward to dying as a homecoming or a sweet reunion? Are you missing something? Is there more joy to be experienced if we cultivate that desire for sweet reunion? From a Buddhist perspective, they seem to have been able to accept the impermanence of all things, which meant they did not cling too tightly to life or to death. Just even talking about dying is not easy for most of us, and yet we're in the process of it every day. While we tend to think that if we're young, we don't have to worry about it for a while, and if we're old, we should hurry up and think about it. Hopefully, if we've learned something in the past year, it's that we don't know the day or the time or the hour or the year. And in the words of Roske, we're not here forever, no matter our age. Knowing that we're not going to live forever is supposed to invite us to live more fully in the present rather than to declare that we're already dead in some way. We've all seen and known people who begin to die long before they're actively dying. We've also seen others who live right up until that moment when they take their last breath. Where are you with your own dying? How does it feel to talk about it or even to acknowledge it? What are your fears about dying? Have you considered wanting to experience joy as you die? And what would that look like for you? It looks different for all of us, what that joy would look like in the midst of dying. What would it look like for you? And a question to consider, maybe even beyond this morning, how tightly are you clinging to either life or death? And what might help you loosen your grip? As I was thinking back from childhood to now in my own relationship with my death, I think about all the things that have informed it. I've had terrifying nightmares in which I died at the end. I've had vivid pictures of a heaven with mansions and my living comfortably in one of them. That was more from when I was a child. I have felt fear that I would instantly be forgotten. I've worried about my adult children and my spouse making their way without me. I've imagined on my tiredest days what it would be like to rest for eternity. I've questioned whether or not I would still worry throughout eternity. And I've educated myself about options so that I won't suffer needlessly or bankrupt my family if I need years of care. It's a whole spectrum of things, isn't it? While many people who are dying want to be assured and reassured of their experience of eternity, the reality is that what happens beyond death is a complete mystery. We can guess at it. I can offer assurances that I know nothing about. But death and what happens beyond is a complete mystery. Well, it seems like a good goal to have the attitude that the Apostle Paul and my friend Ken had about life and death, being even Stephen in terms of appeal. I'm actually okay with my 2 feet being firmly planted here on earth because at this point, it's all I know for sure. My call is to be here as fully as I know how. While I cultivate joy in my life here on earth, I trust that the same joy will be present in my dying process. As I experience joy in my relationship with God here and now, I trust deeply that I will experience joy with God in my life beyond, whatever that looks like. As I have grown in faith and learned how to read the Bible for myself, I've given up the notion of heaven as a physical place to go with huge mansions and gold streets. What I cling to is the experience of being known completely, being loved completely, and how that feels. And then imagining being immersed in that feeling forever. No judgment, no worry, no other voices coming in, just complete love, complete acceptance, complete knowing and understanding. If you have questions or fears, or even just want to talk about death or your own dying, let's talk. I don't have any answers. I mean, I might have a couple answers about a couple things, let's be honest. But mostly, I have some great questions for you. Joy can be as much a part of your dying as it is your living. And we can talk about how that is possible. I have experience with dying, though I have not died yet myself. We, all of us, are not here forever. So we might as well live and die with all the joy we can cultivate and practice. Amen.